Stu, this is Tom Kelly. I just wanted to ask you, what was your biggest thrill as a official, a hockey official?
Well, it's a good question because I had many thrills, and as I say, the aspect of my career was multidimensional. I had the first game I ever worked. I came out of the stands and worked a game that had a great impact on the Stanley Cup playoffs, and eventually who won the Stanley Cup, a Montreal at Boston game where I filled in for an injured Dave Newell in 1986. It was just prior to the playoffs. Montreal got home ice advantage by tying the Bruins 3-3 on March 26th in '86. So having my first game in Boston Garden as a referee after having had my first game as an NHL player in Boston against the Bruins as a player for the Quebec Nordiques, and then of course after I had been ill with cancer, I made my comeback in Boston Garden and got a standing ovation, which not many officials are ever going to get in their careers. And that was in 1999, after being ill in '98. And then, of course, in 2003, in March, I had the chance to work my 1,000th game, the first American to ever referee 1,000 games in the history of the league. And then 2 weeks later, I announced my retirement and worked my 1,010th and last regular season game in Boston. So I had many, many great moments tied to the Bruins and tied to the Garden and tied to Causeway Street. But I would have to say that my greatest thrill as a referee certainly has been the Canada Cup in 1987 when I worked the second game of the final series, the Soviet Union with Fetisov, Larionov, Kasatonov, Krutov, and certainly, you know, when you look at Tikhonov, who's the coach, former coach of the Red Army team, that coupled with Mike Keenan on the other side, disallowing 2 Russian goals, 6-5 double overtime, and some say the greatest game ever played.
Oh, it sounds like a great game. Stu, it's back to Joe. And we know you've mentioned officiating in the Stanley Cup, and the Stanley Cup is really the mecca of the National Hockey League, and I gotta ask, do you feel like when you do ref a Stanley Cup game, is there more pressure on you to make sure the calls you make are the right ones?
Well, I think that the Stanley Cup, of course, is going to have the added dimension of pressure. But I, as a referee, would treat every game equal to the first game I ever worked. And I felt that every game deserved my 100%. I laugh when people talk about giving 110, 120. It's impossible. You give it your best. What I tried to do is bleach my mind and go into the game with a calmness that the players deserve, an open mind, and an ability to appreciate the moment. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that it's such a snapshot, it's such a quick happening. And I did 49 Stanley Cup playoff games in my career. Not enough in comparison to others, but I did get to the Stanley Cup playoffs and had the opportunity to work. And as I say, every other league I ever worked in, I worked in the finals. So I think it's interesting to note in the history of the league, there have only ever been 4 Americans that have ever worked a Stanley Cup playoff game as a referee in the NHL, in the history of the league, which is over 90 years. And so you look at it and wonder why. And I know the reasons, and I think that, you know, it's just happening that I got a chance to work at all.
Stu, this is Jason again. So did you have a scariest moment as a referee, such as a puck almost hit you in the face or you were almost ran over by a player?
Well, I had, those are that's the cost of doing business. I think my moment was flying from New York to Chicago. I was on a plane with KISS, and the hydraulics blew about 1,500 feet after we took off from LaGuardia, and 5 minutes later we landed on our belly at Kennedy. And I think that that was a moment that probably was my scariest. But along the way, including my illness, it's just not in my hands to decide when it's my time. So getting broken bones and losing teeth and getting hit with pucks and all of that, that's the cost of doing business. And as a referee, I put a helmet on once, and Brad McCrimmon hit me with a puck, so I promptly took it off.
Paul, this is Tom again. I want to know, as an official, how did you handle those agitators, those enforcers?
Well, it's interesting because they knew that I probably understood and accepted them in a more kind and loving way than any other official, because if you check the records and Google me or go online to YouTube, you'll see that I was the reason there was a referee when I was a player. I had over 1,250 minutes in my 7.5 years of pro hockey. And my first game in Boston as a player against the Bruins, I got a hat trick. I fought Terry O'Reilly, Stan Jonathan, and Al Secord in a row. So
Nice.
the fact is that a lot of people, are fearing the tough guy, and I understood their job and I understood their role, and I think that the safest place to be sometimes is in a fight when you tell the two guys that are going at it, okay, help yourself, we're not breaking it up, and a lot of those paper tigers tend to lose their courage.
Definitely. And like we've said, one of the only Americans to ref over 1,000 games, so you seem to know the rules pretty much, and that leads me to this past Stanley Cup playoff. It was Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals between the Blackhawks and the Red Wings. There was a very controversial call that disallowed the goal to the Red Wings, which would have given them the lead. So I have to ask, do you think the right call was made in that game?
Well, a lot of people who are listening to this interview might think that because I'm backing Stephen Walkham, number 24, who was the referee in that game, it's because I'm a great supporter of Stephen Walkham. In actuality, in 2003, and I retired, I worked as a supervisor for the NHL for 2 years, and when Stephen Walkham was elevated to the referee-in-chief position for 4 years, his first act upon entering that role was firing me as a supervisor. So necessarily, I may not support his call, but I think, in all honesty, as a referee, those two actions, the player hoisting the Blackhawk player over the boards, and then the Blackhawk player coming back and wrestling the Detroit player down and tearing his helmet off, would those not be penalties in October?
I know. Thank you.
So my attitude is that the referee, who's the back referee, is not interested in the action of the puck. He's interested in the peripheral action and if it's clean and safe. Furthermore, when the Chicago player hoisted the Detroit player over the boards, Chicago had the puck. So that's a foul, so that kills the play. And then the Detroit player, by retaliating, creates another foul. So two matching minors kill the play, whether a whistle goes or not, or whether the puck goes in the net. So the correct call was made. A lot of people said, oh, they should have let the play go. It shows no field. You know what? Mugging and rape are penalties.
Not just in hockey. Not just in hockey.
Yeah, so coming from both a referee and a player's standpoint, how do you handle a player who's arguing about a call? Because you've been on both sides, from a referee and as a player.
Well, you have to understand that I do know what the fox is thinking, and I certainly understand the hound. And I think that the aspect, as far as it goes, is that you listen and you try to reason with them. And then what you do is you read people, and if you can understand that there are some points in a conversation where no matter what you say, you're not going to get through, that's when you say, this conversation's over. And if you keep after me, you're going to get a penalty. And my first week in the NHL, I was challenged by Yzerman, Gretzky, and Lemieux. And that was another hat trick because I dumped each one of them out of the game. And I soon established myself as a guy that had a lot of patience and a lot of time for players, but I also had a line in the sand, and there were some aspects of conversation that, such as questioning my sexual preference or my physical equipment, you really shouldn't do that.
Stu, I wanted to ask from an official standpoint, how did you go about calling an embellishment penalty?
Well, a lot of times, depending on who it was and depending on the status of the game and the situation, you need to have good feel. And a lot of times, if it was a player that I knew was a great competitor, like a Theo Fleury or a Dino Ciccarelli or someone along that line, Randy Burge is another that played for Boston, or even further into the careers, maybe even a player like a Joe Mullen. They're great competitors and they want to win. And so, depending on who it was, you might skate by and say, "Stay on your feet." Then you might talk to the coach and say to them, "If I have to be guessing, your guys will be on their knees all night." But a lot of times, if the player who maybe legitimately was fouled embellished the play, and I chose not to call either one, and he said something to me, then that might be the time when I might call something. So I used to leave it in the hands of those players. And a lot of times I might even skate by and say, "Get up." Like Claude Lemieux was a guy from Montreal.
Oh.
He had a lot of, as I said, he had a lot of action. He should have been an elevator operator. He was up, he was down, he was up, he was down. And I said to Pat Burns one night in Montreal, "Either you coach him or I dump him. You decide."
All right.
And I leave it at that. But they could read my eyes and they knew where I was going. But if I, now in the role of being a director of officiating and coaching my officials, what I tell them is if they want to embarrass the game, then embarrass them.
All right. Well, Paul, we would like to thank you so much for being a part of KS Sports Sunday. It was great talking to you, and have a good time.
Well, I'll be looking forward to seeing all of you on ESPN and the taking over for Steve Levy and all my other friends, Barry Melrose. Just grow your hair a little longer in the back.
All right. Well,
You listen to that great communicator, Jimmy Young, because they even did a movie about him, Mighty Jim Young.
all right.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks again to Paul Stewart, former NHL player and referee. We're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we'll discuss Red Sox Angels from earlier today, and we're joined by another guest, Matt McCarthy. Stay with us.